Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first story is titled, Throw Me a Biscuit. So this story involves my great-grandfather, Luke. Luke was a farmer from a small Missouri town. When he was a young man, he met Mary, the woman who would eventually become his wife and my great-grandmother. Before they were wed, when he was doing his wooing, direct quote, he said to my dad and his brothers, he was invited over to Mary's house for dinner and so he could meet her parents. Mary's father isn't really involved in this story from what I understand, so I won't give him a name, but her mother, Elle, very much is. During the dinner, as Luke, Mary, and Elle made small talk and ate, Luke decided he wanted a biscuit. They had been placed directly next to Elle, so Luke decided to ask his future mother-in-law for one. But instead of politely asking her for one, Luke decides to show his sense of humor and says this. "Throw me a biscuit, Elle." Yes, he said biscuit, however that's spelled. I don't remember the exact reaction of everyone at the table, but I'm sure Mary was quite mortified. Elle, on the other hand, didn't miss a beat. Luke wanted her to throw him a biscuit, so she did. She picked up a biscuit and threw it directly at him. Luke and Mary were wed not long after, and Luke never spoke to his mother-in-law like that again. The next story is titled, Can You Help With These Charges? I am not sure if this the right sub, and if anyone has another sub to post it to, let me know. The compliance in this story wasn't from me, but the customer service agent I was on the phone with. A little backstory, my family had two separate home phones. One was a landline for in-country calling, and one was an internet-based phone service for calling out of country. I had a cousin visiting and he would call his family in India, but unknown to us, he was using the wrong phone. We found out once my dad saw the phone bill was 10x what it would normally be. Since this was a rare occurrence, I called customer service to see if we could be cut some slack. I did the whole, we have been loyal customers, I had family visiting, is there anything you can do or a discount you can give us? I honestly did not know what to expect, but this is where I had the best customer experience of my life. I asked for help, and the agent provided it. She replied in Hindi asking if I speak it. I told her I spoke a bit, and she carefully explained to me what I should. She said I should not say I had family over, that made a mistake. Instead I should call back after a little and say I do not know where these charges came from and we have never made any out-of-country calls. I comply with everything she told me, and sure enough, we only had to pay our regular bill and nothing more. The next story is titled, EK Gets Us, Suspended for a Week. Okay, I work on elevators, and was, at this time, an apprentice working on service jobs with a mechanic. We'll call him Rick. Now Rick was a really nice guy, we got along really well, but he had a bit of a short fuse. Thrown tools were fairly normal if he got frustrated. Anyways, we were working on an elevator with the machinery in the basement, and some of it was only accessible from the elevator pit. We took all the steps we normally would, put signs on the walls over the buttons saying that the elevator was out of service, barricaded our work area at the bottom floor, shut the elevator down and went to work. Now, this elevator had the buttons and doors on the same circuit as the cab lights, which is very unusual for elevators, and we hadn't turned the light switch off because, well, we wanted the lights. Entitled Mum Never Found Out Her Name now comes into play. I'm working in the elevator pit, and I hear the elevator doors open, and then hear M step in, and the loud noise of the buttons in the cab being hammered. This quickly turned into her banging, and then kicking the doors and screaming for help. This progression took less time than it would have taken for me to get a word in edgewise. I, being the nice guy the first am, yelled up to her to press the door open button, but, as the sign sheet had to move to press the button, said the elevator was out of order. A few confused sounding seconds later, the doors open and M exits. I'm thinking okay, no big deal, situation over. Nope. M storms down the stairs, pretty fast I'll admit, and starts pounding on the bottom door where we've barricaded off our area. So she's already inside a barrier that's very much there for her safety, and she's screaming at me that I trapped her in the elevator and I need to turn it on now because her baby was on the 4th floor in her stroller and needed to come downstairs to go to an appointment. Now, Rick and I are, as I've said, pretty nice guys, and if she'd come and asked politely when the elevator would be fixed, he'd probably have sent me to go help her. Hey, I'm the apprentice, that's the brakes, but I'd happily go and give a hand. Today would be different. I stayed where I was because, frankly, she can't get to me so she can have her tantrum. Then Rick arrived. She saw him, in his elevator company shirt, and went off that I had trapped her, and the elevator fell, and her baby was in the hallway and needed to come down right now, so we better get the elevator turned on right now. Now Rick is also very smart, and has been doing service for many years. He calmly tells her we can't just turn it on, we have to complete the repairs for safety reasons. M goes off again, losing her mind at Rick before using the classic M phrase. I want to speak to your supervisor. Rick is prepared for this. You see, Rick is technically his own supervisor, and his business cards say service supervisor on them. So he hands her his own card, and walks outside to the van. Of course she calls him, tells a story that almost resembles what actually happened, which is the last straw for Rick. Don't ducking lie to Rick. So he maintains his composure, and tells her that our behavior was unacceptable, and that he would be suspending us for a week without pay. After a few minutes he came in, knocked on the door where I was waiting, so I opened it up. He leaned down and whispered, "Pack up and act angry," so I played along, packed up the tools and carried them to the van, straight past M still fuming in the hall. On the way out she asked Rick what was going on and when the elevator would be back on. Rick looked at her, deadpan, and said, "Well, I just got suspended for a week, and I'm the only one who can do this job, so in about a week." A week later we returned and flipped the switch. I had finished while we were waiting for M. The next story is titled, Staying the Night at a Friend's. So my parents had this rule where I had a curfew, pretty standard. But this curfew was on the weekend, too. Now, I'm sure many people's parents had that rule enforced too, but it just didn't make sense to me. So I had to be home before 12 on the weekends. If I ended up staying at a friend's too long, last midnight, I would be grounded for getting home too late. However, I was allowed to sleep over at friends' houses. This made absolutely no sense to me, so after months of protesting this rule, I decided to say, to hell with the bureaucracy. I was over at a friend's house on the weekend. I planned on going home, and my parents knew that. It was around 11:30 p.m. when I realized the time. We were watching a movie that had over an hour left. I also couldn't sleep over, because my friend had something to do very early the next day. My parents didn't know this. I texted my mum and asked to stay the night. She said yes, and I got to finish the movie. I drove home at around 1:30 a.m., and came in the house. They were pisses, and demanded to know why I was home. I just replied, I wanted to stay the night, then I changed my mind and felt like coming home. I still got grounded because my parents are irrational, but it was still a win in my book. Anticlimactic ending, I know. Maybe this should go on AITA now that I'm reading it. LMFAO. The next story is titled, I'll sign your letter, but you won't like it. I, 19, live with my father. Him and my mother separated when I was like 5. I have a younger sister, 16, and we had a really bad childhood with him. We walked on eggshells the whole time. The smallest things would set him up, and it was totally unstable. My sister refuses to live with him anymore because she's so angry about how he treated us. Regardless, I live at his and my mum's houses half and half because I pity his loneliness. He won't really have a real relationship because of his manipulative and abusive ways. My sister wants to study in New Zealand, we're in Australia, but she needs a permission letter signed by both parents. He's bitter that they didn't ask him if studying abroad was a good idea. They sent the unsigned draft a week ago and it was due today. He added a sentence about how when my sister is 18 her educational decisions will be her responsibility, but she will continue conspiring with her mum and excluding her dad, or something idiot to that nature. So, he signed and sent the letter. It's unusable and they'll probably miss the deadline, but technically he did what they ask. According to my mum, editing that sentence out is fraud and she can't legally do it. So, yeah. He's a D-bag. The next story is titled, You Want Me to Call the Cops? Not a problem. This happened to me in 2013. I was over 30, had gone back to school, and it was the Friday before finals week on my last semester to finish my CE degree. Bordering around campus, it's rather low income and not highly educated, and not a place I frequented. I walked into a gas station, we'll call it Square L, about 7:30 a.m. Locally, that's 30 minutes after they start selling alcohol. County is dry between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. Grab 2 of the largest packs of cheap beer they sell, and head up to the register. No big deal, just stocking up for a small study party with friends on campus later that day. The person behind the register eyes me suspiciously as I set them on the counter and tells me I'm not buying them. I politely explain it's after 7 a.m. and I don't see a problem. The manager, denoted by dress shirt instead of polo, leans over and tells her to get my ID, so she asks me for it. I'm like fine, whatever, and I fidget around a minute before realizing it's in my car. I say as much and offer to grab it, and she told me to go ahead. I dash out to my car, grab my wallet from my book bag. No big deal. Walk back in and present it to the person at the register, who promptly glances at it, snickers, snaps it in half, tosses it in the trash, and tells me to get the duck out of her store. I stood there a minute, sort of dumbfounded. The manager tells me to get the duck out of the store or police will be called and someone is getting arrested. I mumbled something along the lines of "oh crap," and opted to comply with the second half. I went to my car, grabbed my phone, called non-emergency and told them I just had my driver's license taken and destroyed, read off the address, ended my call, then headed back inside and stood. The manager tells me that's it, they are calling the cops. I let her know I already did. The clerk laughs and shouts for the people in the store to hear, "Y'all want to stick around, this punk called the cops on us for taking their fake ID." It took about 10 minutes, but they showed up. As they arrived, the manager rushed out the door, and I walked behind. The cop asked for me immediately by name, dismissing the manager pointing at me and rattling off about my fake ID. I told him what happened, and I was told to leave or cops were to be called and someone were to be arrested. He then takes the statement from the manager, then the clerk, then requests the ID be retrieved from the trash. He looks it over, and hands the two pieces back to me. He hasn't said anything other than simple requests for info up to this point, then asks me to come along, and we're going to have a chat outside. At this point, I'm actually growing a bit concerned. He punches in the DL number, and up pops my face and info. Clean history both driving and criminal. He then lets me know that destruction of a license is a misdemeanor in this state, and asks which one snapped it. We have a brief conversation, and at this point, he's smiling ear to ear. He asks me if I want to press charges, and at this point, I've already missed first class, so state I do. I'm told to play along with him, and we share course of action. By this time, there were 4 squad cars, and police milling about. Customers had grown scarce. We walked back in, I'm staring at the floor looking pensive, and he says loudly, "What do we say?" and nudges me. I politely say, "I'm very sorry this happened, and I'm sure it won't happen again." The clerk and manager begin chuckling. I then finish with, "The manager requested the clerk take it, who snapped it, then the manager is the one who said someone is getting arrested." The officer undid the cuffs from his belt, walked up to the clerk, and began with Miranda rights. Another did the same to the manager. Another 30 minutes roll by while they are sitting in the backs of squad cars. Store is devoid of employees until someone walks out from the back cooler. I wait patiently, eventually they are cut loose under own recognizance, and I'm given a date to play witness in court. We head back in and the manager is irate. The employee, on release, bolted. I pay for my now warm beer, and leave. My professor got a great laugh out of the police report, and let me do my project presentation late anyway. The next story is titled, "And This Is Why I Love My Boss." I work at a small mum-and-pop pizza place in a small town. We're the only not gas station pizza place in town. Friday nights get busy. So my boss is cooking and I'm waitressing. The cook cooks and the waitress does everything else. It would be nice to have 2 of us, but we manage and the people of our town expect it and respect it after all these years. It's busy, I've got several tables and the phone has been ringing off the hook with to-go orders. I've got piles of dishes, someone is constantly at the register and food is constantly ready to go out. My customers are being great. Everyone is smiling and laughing and not worried that things are taking a bit longer than a Tuesday night. I was busy but not stressed yet. Then he calls. Some guy from out of town. There was a high school game, so we had a few out-of-towners that night. He orders a large thin crust. Our thin crust is very thin, about as thin as a cracker crust, but it's not crispy like that. Pizza with pepperoni. Easy peasy. He wants it well done. Can do. He wants us to put it in the oven for an extra 5 minutes. I say okay with zero intention of doing that. We have a brick oven, our thins go in the oven for 3 to 4 minutes, 4.5 for well done. That's total. This guy wants 5 extra minutes on top of that. He wants a 16-inch charcoal hockey puck. I assume he thinks he knows what he's talking about and just put on the ticket. Well done. We do our thing. His pizza looks beautiful. He comes to pick it up and before paying he opens the box to inspect his pizza. This is normal and I'm not worried. Him, I asked for my pizza well done. Me, this is how we make our pizzas well done. Any more than this and your pizza will burn. Him, I'm not paying for this, I'm not eating this, I want a new one and I want it how I ordered. Put it in for 5 more minutes. At this point my boss taps me on the shoulder and tells me to take over the cooking while he handles the customer. Our kitchen abuts the register counter. I'm literally making pizza 5 feet away from the interaction so I get to hear the whole thing. My boss tries to tell the guy how long we usually cook the pizzas, what's going to happen to his pizza, etc. etc. Customer is having none of it. He wants this pizza cooked the normal time plus an additional 5 minutes. After a few minutes I can tell my boss has had enough of this guy. Boss, sure you don't just want this pizza? Meaning the one we had already made. Guy says no, so my boss brings it out to one of our regulars and let him have it. He comes back to the guy and informs him if he wants his cooked for 9 minutes he needs to pay first. Guy seems satisfied and pays. I hop back to waitressing and boss takes over cooking and making this guy his pizza. It goes in the oven looking beautiful. Boss sets the timer for 9 minutes and makes sure to show the guy the timer. He just smiles and chuckles a little. I'm bussing tables and checking people out and answering the phone while we wait on this guy's pizza. The timer goes off for his pizza. Guy comes closer to the counter. It's my job to cut the pizza as soon as boss man puts it in the box. He lifts this solid black, hard-ass charcoal hockey puck out of the oven and sets it in the box. You can barely tell it's a pizza anymore. I attempt to cut it but it is so overcooked it more or less just cracks and crumbles. My back is to him so I can't see his face but I can imagine. I close the box, turn and hand it to him with a smile on my face. Me, enjoy your pizza sir. Guy, stutters a bit, I can't eat that. Boss, we made your pizza to order, if you want a new pizza you'll need to order a new one and pay for that. The guy has this completely broken look on his face. I was actually almost looking forward to a blow-up. My boss is a force to be reckoned with if you curse or disrespect us. He left his pizza on the counter and left. This is why I love my boss. The next story is titled, Want me to log my work time more accurately using a timer because you think I'm cheating you? Happy to oblige. This happened a while ago, and I've since moved jobs. Basically, every employee in my department was supposed to log their work hours and the project they were working on. When I first joined the company, I noticed that there was an inbuilt timer in the software which you can start, stop to get accurate logs, but I asked my bosses and other employees around, and everyone told me that no one uses it, and everyone fills in the log EOD or first thing in the morning next day. I was cool with that. So I started logging my time just like everyone else. Things were fine for quite a while, till I started putting in more and more hours to get work done. Fast forward to that fateful day, I get called by management. They tell me that my logging seems dishonest and deliberately misleading. I got told off saying they rely on these numbers to plan deadlines for the future, only on paper, not in practice, and that I'm cheating the company. They instructed me to only use the timer next day on, and nothing else. I should probably mention that the way I logged time till then was rounded down to 30-minute increments, just out of personal preference. For example, if a meeting lasted 45 minutes, I'd more often than not log 30 minutes. On top of that, I used to remove an hour off the top just as an eyeball figure for lunch and smoke breaks, because on AVG that's how long it took. And I should add that everyone, including my bosses, used to log time similarly. The company had trusted us to not be dishonest with it, and generally it worked out fine. Anyway, that day on, I started using the timer for everything. 10-minute briefing? Going in the log. 5-minute company call? Logged. Started eating in 15 minutes instead of 30, cut down smoke breaks from 2 to 1, etc. Basically, I made sure almost every minute between my in and out times would be accounted for. They also maintained a timestamp of all the times someone enters and exits the office, which they combined with the log to check. I made sure I was not being dishonest in any way, and just logging my actual work times. As you can guess, all the 11-hour overtime days piled up pretty quick, and at the end of the month, I got called by management again. My boss and his boss were both there. My boss was furious, demanding to know how my overtime hours had nearly doubled from previous months. I just said I don't know, I'm using the timer just like I was instructed to. I told them to go through my in and out times, my breaks, my deliverables, and when the timer was started and stopped to check if I was being dishonest or not. They sent me away after yelling at me a bit more, threatening termination if I was wrong. Next day, my boss told me to stop using the timer again, and apologized for calling me dishonest. I stopped using it, but I told him that now I knew more accurately how long my stuff takes, so I'll be logging accordingly even if I do so manually. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and post some bear emojis in the comment.